Serious people who've had intercourse with their significant other ex-friend's parent. How the hell did you get to that point? What happened after? I have slept with two of my mom's friends. The first one, she just asked if I wanted it, and it happened. The second one, I went to her house, which was a couple of hours away, to do some handiwork. Next thing I know, we're drinking, and we ended up having intercourse. It went on for about 6 months after that. I'm not allowed to meet her friends anymore, which is okay because I'm happily married now. Friend's mom, going through some tough times with her husband, accidentally added one of our friends on Facebook. She started flirting with him, and eventually they ducked. After this kept going on for a couple of months, dude decided to tell his friend's son about it, at his house. The son cried, they threw hands at each other, and everything was all right moments later. Don't really know what happened after that. Lost contact with both of them. My brother's best friend from high school dated my mom in his 30s. She had my brother really young, when she was barely 15. So when his friend was in his 30s, she wasn't yet 50. I will always remember the night he found out. They fought, and my brother's friend left the house and got into his car. My brother followed him out and punched him in the head, though the driver's side window. He managed to go through the window and still connect with enough force to knock him out cold. In my late 20s, I had a friend in a small mountain town in the western U.S. His mom gets separated, moves in with him. She's mildly flirtatious with me, no big deal, not enough to raise any red flags. Job changes, and I move to the city, 90 miles south. He comes on weekends to party a few times, normal stuff. Then he comes to party and brings her. At her request, we have a late-night duck fest while he's passed out in the next room. Major violation of bro code by me, but she asked nicely. No surprise we weren't friends after that. A good friend of mine had this happen to her back in high school. She caught her also high school-aged boyfriend intercoursing her 40-something-year-old mother, and it led to her mom and her stepdad's divorce. All while she was 17 years old. She still has a strained relationship with her mom to this day. We are 25 now, so this happened almost 10 years ago. I don't think you can ever get over that kind of betrayal by your own mother. I believe she still has a good relationship with her now ex-stepdad, though. Her mom is now dating a man her age, but she will always be a predator in my eyes that seduces her daughter's boyfriend. So gross. A friend of mine's mom basically hit on a number of us in the group, and sadly it just became kind of a matter of time before one of us caved, and it eventually happened. He saw it coming. I feel bad for him. Recently divorced mid-30s hot mom and a group of 18-year-olds. It wasn't me who did it. Who did? This reminds me of the mom of my cousin's wife. When her kids were younger, they used to bring home kids from school that had it really rough in their life. She would talk with them and help them, but one thing that was interesting she mentioned was that she was glad to have parents around who would initiate physical contact with them. She said she knew these youngsters needed physical contact since some of them had been feeling lonely or mistreated for a while, but she said she couldn't be the one giving it to them. Now reading these comments, I understand what she meant by that. My first serious girlfriend's mom used to text me every day after me and her daughter broke up, just friendly stuff at first. Talking about music and other mutual interests, and I used her to keep tabs on what my ex was doing because I was dumb 16-year-old kid. Eventually, it led to her telling me how much I reminded her of her high school boyfriend that killed himself, and she went on to tell me she lost her virginity to him and how much she loved him. Then things took a turn. She started sending very intimate texts which turned into nudes and phone intercourse and plans to hook up. Eventually, I ended up walking away from it all before anything really happened. I didn't think much of it back then, but looking back at it now, I was a 16-year-old heartbroken boy, and she was a 40-year-old married woman, so that's pretty ducked up to think about now. Basically groomed and taken advantage of by someone I thought was my friend. Edit. This is actually my first time sharing this with anyone, so thank you for hearing my story. I slept with my friend's mother at a music fest, was very high on acid. We were all hanging out. Me, my two friends who were dating. We'll call them David and Claire's mother. Claire doesn't feel too hot, so David takes her back to the campsite, and me and her mother are just left to the festival. We get some drinks in, do some dancing. One thing leads to yeah. Afterwards, we just sort of chilled in my tent for a few hours before hitting the party tent, having a wee cuddle. Claire actually walked in on us after we had, and I was so high I didn't even really know what was happening. I just knew that I had done something very wrong. So the festival ends, and we all go home, and of course the sensible thing to do would have been to try patch things up with Claire and never talk to her mother again. You will find, however, that I am not a sensible man, and proceeded to not only see her again, but date her on and off for 4 years. I have so many stories about those 4 years. I hooked up with my student's mom. I was teaching an after-school program, so I saw her almost every week at pickup. Sometimes her husband would pick up. Yes, she was married, and we would talk a lot to the point that we became friendly. Well, I was going through a divorce and happened to bring that up one time, and she very quickly gave me her phone number, put her hands on me. She was not being shy about it. Something like out of a movie. Next time I saw her, she asked me out to lunch, and I said sure. We met up, had lunch she paid, and she went on to tell me about how her and her husband were not intimately involved with each other, and they were free to see other people. We went back to my place, and the intercourse was wild. That was the only time we hooked up, though, as I started dating someone shortly thereafter. Her kid was one of those I'll duck your mom Xbox Live kids, so I would just chuckle to myself when I saw him. I had intercourse with one of my best friend's mom. It was Thanksgiving, and I was driving her back home, and she confessed that she didn't have intercourse in years since she was a widow. I told her that I didn't have intercourse in months since I was moving. We talked a bit more, and we sort of flirted, and once we got to her house, she asked me to come inside, and we did the deed. Eat it? I accidentally put dead instead of deed at the very end. That's my mistake. I did not duck a dead body. I am not into that shit. My mom had a friend, and I was friends with her son. I had turned 16 in November and went to their house for a party over Christmas. I got drunk and passed out on the couch in the living room. I woke up to the house empty, apart from my friend's mom sucking my pee-pee. That turned into a relationship for about 18 months. One afternoon, my mom is telling me how shit I am and how none of my friends can be trusted. So I asked her if she could trust all her friends. When she says, yeah, I asked even Margaret. And then the truth came out. Most of truths anyway. Never spoke to my friend again, but I did have to fight some drug dealer friends of his. Apparently, Margaret came around to my mom's house the day after and got a mouthful of abuse. I don't know what was said, but I'll guarantee that it was more about the breach of trust between her and my mom, and less about the intimate assault. My mom has never really forgiven me for it. By the way, I'm UK, and age of consent over here is 16. I had intercourse with a good friend's mom. Looking back, it's really messed up. She had been working on me for months. I was only 18. I'm ashamed of it. Fortunately, the friend never found out. But as an adult, I now look back at it and realize that I was in over my head and she should have known better. Edit. Wow, everyone. I appreciate the sympathy. Let me just tell you a little more so you don't worry about me. Was I groomed? Maybe looking back, I was. But I was certainly no virgin. The reason I feel ashamed of it is because it was my friend's mom. I could have had her any time, and she offered pretty often, so one night I decided to take her up on it. This doesn't affect me today. Probably never did in any deep way, except feeling like crap because it was a betrayal of my friend. But as an adult, I find her decisions disgusting. And as an adult, I realized that my 18-year-old self didn't know anything about life and rarely thought of anything beyond getting laid. I'm not hard on myself about it these days, but I was for several years. Well, I was a horny guy, and my friend's mom was, well, available, really. I'm not proud of it. It just kind of happened sometimes, and every time I felt shame. I don't know, like I was betraying my friend's trust. Worst thing was, she was actually a friend of my mom too, so I kind of saw her on a regular basis. My sister was talking this one kid I didn't really care for and ended up working with him at the job I was managing at. There was a woman working in a different area at that same job. I ended up having a one-night stand with her after we had been flirting a bit here and there. And come to find out later, that was the dude's mom. My sister would then use this as a comeback and say, well, your mom sucked off my bro. It was a weird time several years ago. All kind of moved away after a bit. Nothing much outside of that happened. Interesting that the top 20 or so comments are younger male with older female and one older male. Is that really that much more common? Or is it more that young men like to brag about it, while a woman feels shame for hooking up with a dad? Not really an ex, but an ex-coworker I worked with in college. We worked late shift together and had intercourse multiple times in my dorm. Didn't know her mother worked day shift and had a married last name that she kept. So I later, like 1.5 years later, went on to work day shift not knowing that was her mother, and they were aged 18 and 34, so I never thought it could have been. She also made sure not to tell me it was her mom because she said that conversation would be awkward. So yeah, I end up sleeping with her mom as well as her. Neither of them, to my knowledge, know that I slept with the other, and I wasn't willing to tell them. Haven't seen either of them in years, BTW. I graduated and moved. And for those wondering, the mom was better. I slept with a childhood friend's dad while visiting my hometown. Long story short, he's bi and divorced, and I was browsing on a gay hookup app. It's a small countryside town, so the only things to do are ketamine, intercourse, or leave. He messages me, and he clearly doesn't recognize me because I don't look the same as I did a decade ago. I recognize him, and the entire time I'm thinking, this is really weird, but I'm bored, and he's relatively handsome and charming as far as charming goes on Grindr or LOL, so I figure, hey, why not? And hindsight is 2020 because the intercourse was fun, but the entire time I'm thinking, this is my friend's dad. He has literally driven me to school before. Just left an overall odd feeling. My friend doesn't know, and it's going to stay that way because we don't really talk whatsoever now, and it'd be weird to just pop up like your dad jackhammered my prostate, and it was kind of weird. I went to a party with a friend who introduced me to a young lady a couple years older than me. We kind of hit it off with conversation. She explained to me how her and my friend knew each other, and how frequently he'd hang out at her house. Explained how he and her mom basically lived alone because her dad was bedridden on a machine in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Long story short, she came home early one day to find that my friend was there having relations with her mom. That pretty much ended our newly budding romance, and my friend is now heavy into the church. Not the same, but my friend's dad was released from prison and then was sending me DMs. He was in his late 30s, and he'd try to get me to meet up with him. I was 15. My friend never told me why his dad was in prison, but a few years ago I Googled it, and it turns out he was locked up for intimate contact with a minor. I was lucky I didn't meet up with him. This kid's mom at his graduation party I went to high school with. His parents were rich, and it was well known his mom was decent looking and dressed like she was in high school. But this kid always only had his close friends at his house, until his graduation party. My close friend had a twin sister, and we always partied together, and she wound up with an older kid who had already graduated, but he was cool and always hung out with us. So he comes to the grad party with us, long story short. The older kid was found pants down with the drunk mom bent over the bathroom sink. The kid whose party it was and the dad went nuts and chaos ensued. The older kid hit the grad party kid and took off. I heard that the mom wound up sleeping with another kid we went to school with a couple years later, and they got divorced. I'll never forget that chaos, though. That was a fun party. Well, I don't get a chance to tell this often, so duck it. My best friends at the time, Mom. It was New Year's Eve. I was 19. She was 40. I was the super close family friend that was always there. Let it be known she was a worm from the get-go, always flirting and making jokes, and she was the MILF out of the group of friends. Long story short, we were drinking before we went out at their place. With some of her friends, she was having a party. We were going out. Anyway, the night goes on. I end up by myself and walking home. Instead, I went to let's call him Pete's house. His mom was still up with one of her mates. I turned up with another bottle and proceeded to drink with them. Her friend left, and I stayed, waiting for Pete. I sat next to her, and before you know it, my hand is on her leg. She said to me, "I'm Pete's mom." I said, "I know," with the biggest smile on my face, and she grabbed my hand, and we both went upstairs, and it was just like that. Best night of my life. It was like a porno for me at that age, and I won't forget it. My brother's ex-wife went there with our dad. Needless to say, it ended in 2 divorces and a permanent split in our family. My best friend was dating this chick and having intercourse with her, and when she fell asleep, he would intercourse her mom up, until one day his girlfriend found out, and the mom and daughter fought. It was almost like Jerry Springer. Not friend's mom, but mom's friend. And not vaginal intercourse, but a blowjob. The day I turned 15, I'd helped her lead her horse to an indoor place where you could ride forgot the English name, because her horse was quite skittish. On the way back to our place, she had her horse in our stables. We stopped in some secluded woody area, and she tied up her horse to a tree. Then she got on her knees in front of me, pulled down my pants, said a little birthday present with a smile, and then went to town. I probably lasted for a whopping 45 seconds. I didn't give verbal consent prior, but it was quite consensual, though. I thought she was really hot, which I'm sure I hadn't been able to hide prior to this. Despite being almost twice my age, I think she was 28 or 29. The only way it really has affected me is that I've always had a thing for MILFs. Today I learned there are a lot of predatory moms are there. When I was in high school, a guy I didn't know too well started dating his girlfriend's mom, who was also a teacher at our school. I'm not sure how it affected the mother and daughter's relationship or the guy and his now ex-girlfriend, but a couple of years after high school, my girlfriend and I saw the mom and boyfriend playing tennis at a local park, so it seems like it worked out for those two.